Today, my guest on the show is longtime friend, MMA legend, actor, entrepreneur, and whatever other title I guess you could throw at him, Randy Couture. It's been a while since Randy and I have caught up, so we spent some time telling some funny stories of the two of us. But ultimately, Randy's like a cat who's lived 9 lives. He's wrestled in college. He served in the military. He had his entire MMA career. He's acted in many movies, including The Expendables. And I don't know, dare I say he was a dancer, for example. He was on Dancing with the Stars. But Randy spends some time sharing the wisdom that he's learned from, I guess, living these 9 lives.
Quite frankly, it's kind of unusual.
It's quite Franklin.
Got it. Quite Franklin.
How's things been going for you?
Busy, really, really busy. I last year, obviously I didn't do anything in 2020. I think I did 3 days as myself on a film for my buddy, Nate Boyer, one of the founding members of MVP.
Yeah.
He did wrote a script and got a film funded in 2020 about MVP, our Emerging Vets and Players program, and asked me if I'd play myself as a trainer. I've said, of course. But that was the only job I did the entire year of 2020. And then in February 2021, the floodgates opened, and I have been nonstop since February 2021. I did 5 movies last year. I've already done 1 movie this year. It's just been insane, crazy.
Yeah, it's been really cool seeing you in these different films and whatnot. Like I was at I don't know if it was the first or second Expendables opening out in LA, and just, being out there with that. I think the last time I actually saw you was when we had lunch at the Arnold Classic.
Yeah, that's been a while.
Oh, I know. It seems like it was just like, oh yeah, like 2 years ago. It was probably more like 8. It's crazy.
8 or 9, I think. You're right. Absolutely right.
I'll tell you what I saw that I didn't realize you did was lip sync battle.
Yeah.
Tell me about that experience.
Well, I was still doing brand ambassador stuff for Bellator. And that show came on, and I just thought it was hysterical. I thought it was really, really fun.
Oh, yeah.
And again, just like doing Dances with the Stars, you got to try to show different facets or sides of myself. And people look at us, you and I, and say, oh, that guy's one of those cage fighters. And there's so much more to who we are. And so putting myself outside the box a little bit, doing Dancing with the Stars, doing lip sync battle. I asked Kevin Kay from Bellator, who's high up in Viacom, said, hey man, I would love to do that show. I was doing a brand ambassador appearance for them, and he made it happen. Got me on there and against Gabriel Iglesias. It was really fun. You only get, half a day basically to work out the choreography, but they're professional dancers, so they're really, really good at it. And then the hardest part is remembering you're supposed to be singing. And
exactly, because your lip sync sucked, bro. Like,
but it was fun. I don't think you can ever take yourself too seriously. You got to put yourself out there. You got to have some fun. And that was certainly a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. For the listeners who haven't seen it, you did Olivia Newton-John. Let's Get Physical. And it was hilarious. But midway through, like you're so into the role that you forgot, like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be moving my lips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was glad those shorts held up, but that would have been a whole different show if I'd had a wardrobe malfunction.
I'll tell you, when you watch that show and you see some of these actors that just I don't know if you've seen, for example, like Tom Holland. Tom Holland did a Rihanna song, and he started off with Singing in the Rain. And man, I mean, that kid can dance. Like
wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so when you see people act and you see him playing a role like Spider-Man, for example, and then you see them on a show like that, or like a Joseph Gordon-Levitt when they're playing a guitar or something. And you're just like, man, these people are just mega talented across the board, man. So
yeah, that's really interesting.
For you to step into that world is interesting, because I went out to LA for a little while, and I was taking acting lessons. Like, remember when you had the condo out there and we were out there at that time, and I was asking you about all that. So I'd gone out there, I started taking acting lessons. I was taking like these intensive lessons with a group out there. And then I had hired a private instructor, and I was taking privates with him, and I was auditing a course that he was doing. And I was like fully submerging myself into it. And I went on a bunch of reads at the time. And just as I was doing it, I was like, man, this is just not this grind. That's just not the life I want to live, man. And so, like, much respect to you, because it's paid off for you and whatnot.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for sure. We've spent most of our lives as athletes boxing up our emotions and putting them to the side and staying laser
Oh yeah.
focused on the task at hand. And now they want you in front of the camera to let all that stuff out. And it's such a weird process for sure. I found the acting classes to be very touchy feely and kind of weird.
Yeah.
But nobody was punching me in the face. So I said, I'm going to be fine.
It's
and
amazing.
Then I got a coach. Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing that you can wrestle and grapple and basically to get a little graphic here, have another man's sweaty balls in your face or something like that in the middle of grappling. But to do like an acting class where, I don't know, like the thought of giving somebody an on-screen kiss, for example. Oh man, that freaks me out. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't think I could.
It's an interesting thing for sure. But I ended up finding a coach, Barry Primus, and the one-on-one coaching really, really helped me a lot. Doing improv, and he's just an older guy that's literally written scripts, acted, directed, worked on Broadway. I mean, he's done a little bit of everything, and really feel like I connected with him and learned a lot more about the craft and got a lot better working with the coach, an individual coach.
Let me ask you this: Expendables, Dancing with the Stars, like training things that you had to do. I'm sure for when you did Expendables, you had to do tactical training. When you did Dancing with the Stars, tons of dancing. Of all the things that you've done to date outside of competition, of course, wrestling or fighting, what's been the most physically rigorous where you're like, man, I didn't realize it was going to be like this?
No, Dancing with the Stars, 100%.
I kind of figured you were going to say that.
Because of my Army background, I didn't have to do any tactical training for Expendables. The armors love me because I know my way around a weapon. And, as soon as they hand it to me, I'm checking it. I'm pulling the mag out, opening the chamber, making sure this thing's empty and ready to go. And the guys, they're not used to actors. They know their way around a lot of that stuff. So they relax around me because they know I have some experience there. Dancing with the Stars, you're basically signing up for a crash course in how to be a professional dancer. And we danced every single day. There was not a day off, 7 days a week, at least 6 hours a day.
Did you become the weak?
I was in great shape.
Did you become the weak guy in the gym that was complaining like, look, I need a day off. My body can't handle this.
It freaked my dancing partner out, Karina, because I didn't want to break. I didn't have it figured out yet. And I knew, where the clock is ticking before I have to go in front of an audience on camera and actually do this dance. So it kind of freaked her out that I wasn't willing to take breaks. She wanted a smoke break or a coffee break. And I'm like, no, I haven't got this figured out yet. Yeah. But I still lost 9 pounds. I was in good shape, but we were dancing so much and sweating so much that I lost 9 pounds doing Dancing with the Stars.
What was your nutrition like at the time? Like, I mean, were you eating extra calories to keep up?
I was still just doing the same thing. I started that intermittent fasting when I retired from fighting.
Yeah.
When we're fighting, working out twice a day, 5 or 6 days a week, I could eat whatever the heck I wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
And I knew when I retired from fighting, if I kept that up, I was going to be a fat kid in no time. So, and I was kind of doing the intermittent fasting thing already by accident, just because it was so busy. Yeah. And then I read a couple books about it, and it really seemed to fit me well. It's so easy once you adjust your habits. It's really an easy groove to get into, and it's kept me lean. I can't do a lot of hard sparring or grappling anymore as much as I miss it. My neck just won't take it.
Yeah.
I'll end up having to have a neck surgery. So still do a lot of strength conditioning, the circuit training, and all the stuff that I used to do when I was fighting, but mostly just light sparring now. I don't do any hard grappling or hard. I know you're probably like me. You have one speed. It's either on or off.
Dude, listen, this is what I tell people. Like, if I had to compare myself to an animal, it would be a cheetah. And not because I'm blazing fast. That's not the reason why, but cheetahs pretty much operate in 2 speeds. They are either 100% flat out getting it, or they're just like chilling in a tree. And I have, those are my 2 speeds. It's like either I'm 100% full bore, or I'm just like, I'm good chilling today, man. So,
absolutely the same.
On your intermittent fasting, you do the standard 16-8, like 8 hours of eating and 16 hours off, or?
6 hours of eating. I have a 6-hour window, usually from 1 to 7, 2 to 8, kind of in that range. And then 18-hour fast. I don't eat solid food again until the next day at lunch, a later lunch, and then a regular dinner, and still try to eat good food, good whole foods, and as minimal processed food as possible, which is a challenge in our society, but because everything's processed to hell. I mean, it's just crazy, but but it's become pretty simple.
At this age now, Randy, how much work, like how much working out, how much physical hours do you put in a day?
I've got it pretty refined. If I get 3 or 4 days in a week, it's a good week. Usually I'm lucky to get 2 workouts in, and I'm in and out of there in 45 minutes.
Oh, really?
I have a circuit, a metabolic circuit that I've developed that works my total body. I'm doing 2 lower body exercises, 2 pushing exercises, 2 pulling exercises, and 2 core exercises.
Gotcha.
And I go through that circuit 4 times. I can adjust the weight or the reps. Right now, lately, I've been doing it 15 reps of each of those exercises and busting through that 4 times through. And I can usually get that done in 30 minutes. No rest in between sets, no mulling around. So it kind of rolls the cardio and the anaerobic stuff into the same workout.
So I just before you and I came on, I finished doing some bag work today. I did about an hour and a half of bag work. I went up to the gym. I got keys to my buddy's gym, and Neil, my coach, and it's nice like going in there midday. Nobody else is in there. I have the gym to myself. I'm like, I'm just gonna get an hour and a half of work in. So today I did like I'll mix it between 3 and 5 minute rounds or whatever. But you're hitting the bag, and it's crazy how I'll still work specific drills. Like I'll work like a double head slip, and I'm like, oh man, this hand was down. And you pay attention to all these details. Like you can't just get in and do work, right? It's like I'm still thinking like I got to make myself better than I was yesterday, which is the proper mindset. But it's just funny on the back end of retirement. There is no, I'm just gonna go in and enjoy this workout today. I
find myself the same. We're our own worst enemies. Nobody's going to be more hard on ourselves than we are.
Yeah.
And critical and hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I think that's probably the way it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. With your training and whatnot that you do in nutrition, you're eating 6 hours a day. Do you keep track of your calories at all? Or do you have your body style? Do you have a tendency to put on weight and you have to make sure you keep it off? Or, because I mean, you started off as heavyweight. You were never a big heavyweight, but
yeah, absolutely. I spent half of my career in the heavyweight division, but I was a small heavyweight. I walked around about 220, 223 most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the heaviest I ever was going into a fight was 226, and that was intentionally trying to keep my weight up to deal with a guy like Tim Sylvia or a guy like Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
And I found I was actually worse. My center of gravity changed, even with just that 4 pounds difference. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was less mobile. I was easier to roll over because my center of gravity changed a little bit just from that little bit of extra weight.
Yeah.
I have a tendency, we all have genetic problem areas. And my area is love handles.
Yeah.
Like if I drink beer for a week, or that's exactly where it's going to go. Next thing you know, I'm like, what the hell? I got these crazy love handles.
Yeah. Look, if I'm going to put on body fat, mine will go. That's typically the first place it goes. Like it's the tire around the lower abdomen.
Yeah.
But my nutrition, see, I run the opposite, and I eat very clean, and I make sure that I maintain a high level of protein percentage. I actually just finished doing a 30-day. I interviewed Dr. Sean Baker for my podcast. We had a cool conversation, and he's a carnivore diet guy. So I was like, I'll do carnivore diet.
Oh, okay.
I ate only meat for 30 days because that's what he does. Yeah. And I've since like added some carbohydrates back in because I think like metabolically I have a higher glycogen turnover rate. So I need to, like, my body processes carbs a little bit. So I need them for my workouts. But the net result is like, well, I'm going to get more calories from fat, particularly the fats I get from my meat, and a little less carbs because I was probably eating more than I needed. But it doesn't make a difference really in the way that I look aesthetically, because I've always, even since I've retired, I've kept my body fat under 10%. But I have, because I spent a good portion of my career at 185, my body has a tendency to go down in weight. So I'm constantly making sure, like I eat about 4,200 calories, 4,400 calories a day. I don't really count them, but I just know based on the amounts that I'm eating, because I've done tons of calorie counting in the past, I'm north of 4,000 just to maintain my size. And going back to what you said about like your center of gravity being 226, I walk around right now about 222, which is big for me. And since I've put on, that's like the heaviest I was, because like you, I bounced between middleweight and light heavyweight. But the heaviest I ever competed at light heavyweight was maybe when I fought Forrest. I got up to 212. So I'm about
Oh, wow.
I'm about 10 pounds heavier than I was then, which on my frame looks huge because I'm so lean. And so people are looking at me like, God, what are you fighting? Would you fight heavyweight now if you came out of retirement? And I'm like, really, I'm not that much bigger. It just looks a lot bigger. But I'll tell you this much, that 10 pounds, like my 5K times are horrendous compared to the way they used to be. Like it changes things, you know? So just like little things like center of gravity and whatnot, you're so right, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, unbelievable. That's cool though.
You remember that 5K we ran in Iraq?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I ever told you this story or not, but we were running in groups and we had set a pace, and you were running with a certain group of people. I was running with a certain group of people, and I was lighter at the time. So I turned in, like, I think my time was like, maybe it was sub 22 for sure, but maybe sub 21:30, which was a good time for me at the weight that I was running. But dude, so for the listeners, we were running in Iraq. We were at, was that at Fob Spiker? Was that the base? I think it was that base.
It was at Spiker in Baghdad. Yeah. That was Spiker.
Yeah, it was Spiker. Okay. So
because we rolled in and they had just got a scud that came over the fence. So the day we arrived.
Exactly. So we're running this 5K, and they have, and it's like a loop around the base. And they basically said we were gonna finish at the observation tower. You remember? And remember there was a band there. And remember we came in and we had to sing Sweet Home Alabama. Remember they threw us up on stage
right
in front of like 5,000 people at this base. I'm not exactly an amazing singer, but as we were coming down on the last stretch of that thing, they said you're gonna finish at the observation tower. So I'm guessing maybe like the last 400 meters, I was like, guys, let's pick it up. And because I had a group of, I don't know how many soldiers that were running with me. So I picked this thing up, and I'm pretty much at like a full out sprint on this thing. And as I'm coming around, I get about 300 meters in, and I realize that there's this observation tower in front of another observation tower about another 300 yards away. And dude, I was about to die. Like I had paced myself to just come across this finish line, and I had to like suck it up and be like, I couldn't be like, okay, now that we picked it up, let's just slow it back down, guys. So I almost passed out that day. It was crazy. And then we come in and they're like, hey, get on stage. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Stupid hot.
Remember when we landed, I don't know if you remember, we ate at that Starbucks, or we stopped at that Starbucks in Kuwait, and it was like, it was middle of the day, and it was like something like 137 degrees. And I'm not.
Yeah, you remember that the sliding doors of the hotel would open, and that heat would hit you in the face. You felt like you were in a microwave.
Exactly.
It was insane.
I don't know if you remember, but that Starbucks, they had metal doors. Why anyone would think that designing a building with metal doors in Kuwait is a smart idea? Yeah. Because I grabbed it, and then what I left on the door was an entire layer of skin because I was so hot, man. Like that place was just, it was crazy. I'd never experienced heat like that. That was my first foray into the Middle East when we took that trip together.
I had been to Iran back in '99, but it was not summertime, so it wasn't hot like that.
Yeah.
So that was my first time there as well when it was summer. I mean, we were there in August, the dust storms, which caused us problems traveling around.
Yeah.
And we didn't make it to a couple of fobs because of the dust storms.
Yep.
And then we had to come out early, which is a whole nother story, being back in Kuwait City and going to that shopping mall with Leah. You
remember
wearing the half shirt, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna have to fight for sure,
dude." Fight! I thought we were gonna get shot or killed or something.
Yeah.
Like, because keep in mind we're in a Muslim country. I remember exactly what she was wearing. Exactly.
Yeah, I do too.
She had on a black tank top, and I mean, granted, like Rochelle was very young at the time, right? And she'd probably not done much international travel. I'm assuming knew nothing about Islam, and she comes down. And we're all downstairs. It was me and you and all the army personnel that were with us. And she had on a black tank top that was semi-transparent. And she had underneath of that a bra it was a white bra with black polka dots, and it had lace around the edges and you could see it. And she had on a pair of camouflage capri pants with these, those, like, I don't know whatever you call them, like twine or wicker looking high heel sandal like shoes. And I remember the outfit distinctly, and you and I looked at each other like, and we looked at the army guys, and we're looking at each other like, is nobody going to say anything to this girl?
Exactly.
And then you and I said something to Roddy like, should you perhaps tell her to just put on like a normal t-shirt or something? And then we walked around that whole time down in Kuwait City, and man, people were looking at her like she was the devil. And you and I are like, I don't want to get hit in the head with a brick here, so I'm going to distance myself a little bit.
I would see guys see her from across the street, and they would perk up and they would run across the street to be on our side of the road. And I'm like, oh shit, here it comes. We're going to get into this now.
Yeah, exactly.
And thankfully it never happened, but man, I talk about being on edge.
Yeah. And I think she just flat out didn't know. She'd never been in a culture like that before and didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Somebody should have said something to her though. But yeah, it's crazy because the image of that outfit she was wearing is like forever burned in my mind. And granted, she looked good. I mean, don't get me wrong, but
yeah. Well,
by Western standards,
anywhere else in the world, it wouldn't have been any issue. But out in the public, there in a culture that we're not familiar with, in a place we're not familiar with, I was definitely nervous about that.
Yeah.
But that jet ski ride. That was something.
No, okay, hold on. Listen, I got to tell everybody this story. This is where I met the other side of Randy. Like for everybody that thinks Randy's Captain America, you're not that guy, by the way. So
I don't know what happened.
You flipped a switch. Something happened. I don't know. No, it was all good fun though, and they were game. Those ladies, they were game. We were. Yeah. So we're.
The guy that was pissed was the guy on the beach waiting for us to come back with the jet skis.
Yeah, exactly.
And he wasn't very happy that we got those gals wet. But
well, he was. I think he was afraid that we were going to crash into each other. He didn't care about us getting them wet as much. But yeah, we were out jet skiing in the middle of Sea of Aqaba, and so these two ladies come out on one jet ski, and they're in full burqas, full face, head to toe burqas. And Randy he sees them, and like a dog that was let off of a leash, just beeline straight for them, and just turns this jet ski and just douses them with this ocean water. And then they sat there for a second, and then the next thing I know, they came straight back at him, and it was on. And I was like, this is pretty cool. But it was awesome. I was like, what are you doing, man? It was great though. It was great.
Yeah, I definitely had that little devil pop up on my shoulder saying, yo, go get them wet. You got to get them wet. He won.
Yeah, then we got kicked off the jet skis, and they're pretty much like, bring the jet skis back or we're burning your passports.
Yep. He was not happy.
Have you done a lot of military tours since then? Because I know you do a lot of work with the vets. Because you have your MVP organization, and you have another one that you're involved in.
MVP and Extreme Couture GI Foundation.
Yeah, Extreme Couture GI.
I'm heavily involved with both of those. I have not been back overseas since we went overseas. I have been to a bunch of bases though in the States, Fort Meade and Fort Bliss and several others, both with Affliction and with our charity stuff. I go to the hospital at Walter Reed in Bethesda. It's all Bethesda now. They've kind of tore down the old Walter Reed. But I go there every year, every January usually, to sit down with the families that we've identified that need some financial help and hand out checks from Extreme Couture from the foundation. So that's always a great trip. It's a hard trip to walk the wards and to meet a lot of these families face to face. But it's I don't know. It's just having worn that uniform and taken that oath at 19. It's just something that means a lot to me.
Yeah, I've been to Walter Reed and Bethesda a couple times. It's been several years since I've been there. I also a couple years I was spokesperson for the DAV. And
they're a great organization.
Yeah, they're awesome, man. And I'll tell you what, man, they're very efficient with the way that they spend their money. Like all the money goes to the vets and whatnot. But I went to their winter games one year, and walking through Walter Reed, I've met like triple amputees that were just fresh off of injuries, or guys that had been hit with an IED, or people that had been burned real bad. And it's crazy. Like my impression of walking through that at the time where these guys are still healing. Like, I mean, you're talking about fresh wounds, and they're just sitting there like, man, I just want to get back with my unit. Like that's their primary concern is I want to get back with my unit because my guys need me. And I'm sitting there going like, bro, you lost a leg, and that's all you can think about right now.
Haven't
Speaks
you done
volumes.
Enough already?
Yeah. Speaks volumes of their character, man.
To a man. That's been my experience as well. Walking through the wards every single time, to a man, that's exactly their attitude. Well, I hope they're going to let me go back when I get fitted for this prosthetic and learn to walk again. And I'm like, dude, you've done enough.
Yeah.
Relax. Stay home.
It's kind of like, I mean, the same thing would happen. Take for example, like mid-fight career. Imagine if, like, I don't know, you got poked in the eye and your retina got detached. right? You would seemingly be healthy. And then you have these doctors saying like, you got to walk away from this sport. And you're like,
Yeah.
especially after, I don't know, like after your like 5th title reign and people are like, walk away from the sport. And you're like, nah, but I can't. And you're like, haven't you done enough already? Like, have you not solidified a legacy? You're like, but I still got this burn in me to do this thing. Like I can't, it's my first love.
Well, and that's what MVP deals with. That transition for athletes and veterans is very, very similar. It's chock full of potholes and self-medication and a lot of, I mean, you don't need to stand or sit next to too many vets or too many athletes that have walked away from that part of their identity and who they were for so long. You know, I was sitting next to Tony Gonzalez, who was arguably one of the best tight ends in the league. And he said, yeah, man, 2 years ago, I was Superman. I couldn't do anything wrong. And now who am I? What am I? The same exact struggle for our veterans. A big part of who they are is that uniform and that service. And now they have no purpose. They're all excited to get out of the Army. And then when it's gone, they're like, man, I miss it. I miss that structure. I miss, who am I now? What am I going to do now to make ends meet, to be of purpose, to be of service to people? So finding them and getting them together, sharing and helping them find that new purpose. And it could be getting involved with a charity. So you're helping other folks or some of them is finding a job. I mean, our first 8 MVPers were all homeless vets.
Oh, wow. Living in a
shelter. Yeah. And to see all those guys get into apartments and listen to them tell those stories at our huddle, oh yeah, man, I haven't been, I've been on the streets for 18 months now. I finally got my first apartment. I don't have to worry about somebody watching me,
shower,
you can imagine
pee,
where they went
whatever.
From there.
Yeah.
The shower being nice because that's not what he said, but it was pretty funny. So yeah, it's just been a really, really powerful thing to see these guys kind of wade through that transition and not only help each other, but help themselves get through that. I guarantee you there's somebody else in the circle that's been in the spot that you're in right now. So having that conversation, being willing to open up, show that vulnerability, show those things you're struggling with, that's the only way you're going to get help. And it's inbred in us, certainly as athletes and as soldiers, not to ask for help, not to show vulnerability. So getting them to exhibit that courage to show that vulnerability has been amazing.
Yeah, I think like guys like you and I were blessed in that you had a lot of things going on prior to your fight career, right? I mean, you wrestled, which is a natural transition, but you were also in the Army. And so had fighting left mid-career or something, I don't believe that you would have had a very difficult time reinventing yourself with something else. And same with me, like I had I had a degree in education and I was a teacher, and not that I wanted to go back to teaching, but I knew that there was more to my identity than that. And I think for me personally, I took my career in competition to a point where I was sick of it mentally. Like I was mentally ready to walk away. And I actually took some time off and didn't train for a little while after I finally decided to retire. I was just like, I was so sick of it because the training became, rather than like this pursuit of excellence of a martial art, for example, it became like, how do I beat this opponent? How do I position myself to sign that next contract? How do I land this sponsorship? Like all the business side of it. And I was like, this is not what I got into this for to begin with. And so it kind of, a little bit of me was like kind of disgusted with it. And now I'm in the gym. I love training. I go in and I've been in the gym the last several weeks, and the instructor at George's gym is teaching this De La Hiva series on guard. And this is not the way that I move. I don't use De La Hiva guard. Like I'm going to get back up and I'm going to press forward, like a bit of that wrestling style like you. And so learning like this De La Hiva series is like, it's almost like I've stepped into this class as a white belt, like, okay, hold on. And I'm fumbling through these techniques and it's cool because it'll just add to my game, like as if I need to add to my game at this point in my life. But, regaining that mentality again of enjoyment has been really nice. Yes. And fortunately for me, rolling out of my career, like I've been blessed with a great post-fight career and still working in the business, but at a distance. And so, yeah, man, it's like, I'm very fortunate because I could have ended up like that. So it's a great organization that you're working with. Does MVP actually, is it targeting the veterans or is it also targeting retired players, like retired athletes as well?
Both. Vetsinplayers.org is the website.
Okay.
Obviously, since COVID, we had to pivot and do virtual meetings for a while because of the quarantine. And now, because we almost doubled our footprint just because of the virtual access, we've kept virtual hybrid meetings in the organization so that we're expanding and getting more people tuning in on the Zoom calls and training at home that can't come in person. But we're in 7 cities across the country. It's been much more difficult, honestly, to reach out to the athletes. We're getting a lot of fighters. Horace Gracie's a member. Chuck Liddell's a member. Obviously, I'm involved. We're getting more fighters that are tuning in. Mark Kerr is now a member of MVP, and we're hiring him as our new program director for the Phoenix chapter, which is going to come online here very shortly. We're in 7 cities. We just opened in Dallas. And it's been more interesting that it's been much more difficult to get to the athletes. They all struggle. We know enough of them very closely from training a bunch of them that they struggle with that transition too. But there's this bravado. Oh, I was in the NFL. Oh, I played in the NHL or wherever, that it's much harder to break that wall down, where our vets are a little more willing to say, man, I'm struggling. My wife's leaving me or whatever the case is. They're a lot more willing to commit and open up and show those vulnerabilities than the athletes are. So we're, working diligently to continue to help some of these athletes that are courageous enough to show those weaknesses, to show those vulnerabilities. And that's been a bigger challenge for us. But yeah, I've been fortunate like you. My transitions had already been, that new who I'm going to be now was already built in. As I left the Army, I was rolling into Oklahoma State to be a national champion and to get my college degree. So that purpose was there. When I walked away from fighting, I already had the businesses and acting to keep me engaged and have a purpose there. So I've been very, very fortunate like you in that new purpose was already built in transition. But that's a challenge.
With the MVP organization, what percentage of your veterans, or how many of them, I'll ask, come from like elite level groups in the military? For example, like a MARSOC unit or a SEALs or an Army Ranger.
Tier one operators. Yeah, we have some, absolutely. Some of those questions you don't ask because you're not really supposed to talk about some of that stuff. Some of them are certainly, they're all proud of that service, but a lot of them won't talk about that type of stuff. They'll say, "Oh, I was a Green Beret," or I was a SEAL, but that's about all you're going to get. And I would say probably 10 or 15% of all of our vets are from that world.
Yeah,
the tier one type operators, but across the board, it's a mixed bag. You get everything, all the services included, and every kind of job you can think of.
The reason why I ask is because I would imagine those tier one operators are probably just as difficult to find as like your athletes, right? Because they are kind of the elite of the military, and so I would imagine there's a bit of that pride as well. But of all the military vets, they're probably the ones that need it the most because they've typically seen like the most combat. They've been through the worst of the worst, typically. So
true.
Interesting.
And my experience, those organizations are way more organized. There is a SEAL Team Foundation. There's the Green Beret Foundation. Those tier one units have already established very strong foundations that are going to support those guys once they walk away from that uniform. They're a little more well organized. They're smaller groups and smaller units, as opposed to just being in the Navy or just being in the Army. Once you're out, you're out. There are very few, there's like Dave and Folds of Honor and the Extreme Couture GI Foundation, MVP. There's a lot of smaller foundations to support those regular service members, where the tier one guys usually have foundations and stuff that are established by those guys. They're just a little better organized.
Gotcha. I read I had read that you had a heart attack a couple years ago.
Yeah, 2019. I was working on a film with Michael Jai White in the LA area. I went to, I worked Monday. I had Tuesday off and Wednesday off. I was supposed to be back on set Thursday. So, we're there. I went to Unbreakable and trained like I did, the Friday before that, normal workout, circuit training, all the stuff that I'd normally been doing. And it just felt like crap in the workout, sweating profusely, and had this weird ache in my chest that wrapped around from, like I popped a rib. And I was like, how the hell did I pop a rib in this workout? That's weird. And I just felt like crap. And so I've got a foam roller out. I'm trying to foam roll, pop my rib back in place, not realizing what's going on. And then I drink a after workout drink. And no sooner did I swallow it as it came right back up. and I was like, whoa, what's going on? Because I've never been that guy that puked. I never exerted myself to the point where I puked ever. And so I knew something was wrong when I threw up. And I changed clothes and drove home. Fortunately for me, my condo is 3 blocks from Cedars-Sinai.
Yeah.
You've been down in that neighborhood.
Yeah,
so I get home and I'm like, this ache won't go away. I've tried foam rolling it. Now I'm laying on the bed thinking, man, I just must have overdone it. This is weird. And so I say to Mindy, I'm like, Dave, something's not right. This is weird. It won't go away. Let's walk over to the emergency room. So we walked the 3 blocks over to the emergency room at Cedars-Sinai. The place is packed. It's a madhouse. They sit me down. They said, okay, we'll put you on EKG here, and it's going to take us about 10 minutes. So finally they call my name. I've got some crackhead trying to kick me in the emergency room because I'm walking past her. And then they hooked me up to the EKG, and you'd have thought it was NASCAR. I mean, the clothes were being ripped and cut off. I was on a gurney headed up to the cath lab. They said, you're having a full-blown heart attack. And they just rushed me upstairs. Of course, Mindy's eyes were this big. She thought they were cracking my chest open. They went into my wrist and put in a stent, sucked out the clot. I had a plaque rupture in my diagonal artery. I've had all my arteries checked. They're all the other arteries are clear. That's the only one that has some plaque and stuff in it. And they think it was probably from a car accident I had in 94. I broke my ribs and punctured a lung in this car accident. And they think I must have damaged that artery in the accident, because all my other arteries are clear. And I basically had a plaque rupture. I've always known that I had really thick blood. We always have to get blood tested, CBCs and that, to get certified as a fighter. And my hematocrit and hemoglobin levels were always right at the top of normal. And then, I'm 55 years old, haven't been drug tested or done any of those kinds of medical stuff to get licensed in 5 years since retiring. Actually longer than that. Almost 7 years. So I've seen a general practitioner and a doctor finally after 6 or 7 years, finally get the colonoscopy and some of those medical exams that at my age I was supposed to get. And he's like, man, your testosterone is down at about 170. That's not great. It could be much, much better than that. And I said, well, I don't get tested anymore. So I guess I can go on the TRT program. Well, unfortunately, with the side effect of the TRT is that it forces your hemoglobin to bounce up. So that bounced my naturally high levels over normal. Then I'm dehydrated from this workout. I have this plaque rupture, and my blood does what it's supposed to do. It goes right to the plaque rupture and creates a clot. Well, it occluded the entire artery. So literally 30 minutes from being toast when I walked over to the hospital. And that's why they freaked out so bad.
Yeah, so I don't know who told me the story, but the way the story got relayed back to me was like, you were training, had a heart attack, and was like, look, and just walked yourself to the hospital. You were like, so it was much more legendary when I heard it that way. Like, cause I was like, at first when somebody's like, yeah, Randy had a heart attack, I was like, oh my gosh. And they're like, nah, he was in the middle of training, walked himself to the hospital. I was like, heck, he probably laid down on the OR and was telling the doctors exactly what to do as well. Like while he was conscious, like, here, let me just operate on this myself.
Well, you can imagine Glazer's around, he's one of my best friends. He knows me really, really well. And so he's the one that tells that story a little bit differently and embellishes it a little bit. And, but I mean, there's some truth there. I did walk to the hospital, but let's be honest, in LA, 3 blocks would have been a lot faster to walk that 3 blocks to try and get a ride.
No, absolutely. Or even drive.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So.
No, I'll tell you, it's the same thing. Like you asked me about living on the other side of the planet. I was in Indonesia one time and I was headed to this meeting, and I was just a little over a mile from the meeting, like a mile and a quarter, let's say. And it took almost 3 hours to get there, sitting in traffic in Jakarta. And the problem is I'm in a business suit, and getting out and walking is not an option because by the time you get there, in Southeast Asia, you're just soaked. So you're literally like stuck in this like AC coffin, so to speak. Like it's like you're a prisoner of time, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's that's the hardest part. Being from the Midwest, there's a lot of space here. Traffic isn't that bad, considering, comparatively speaking, to like I've lived in LA. I've been to bigger cities in Chicago and New York. I've spent plenty of time in these cities, and like living in the Cincinnati area is not that bad. Plus, I've set up my lifestyle so I mitigate most of that. Like, I'm typically heading this way to the gym when everybody else is headed this way during rush hour, you know?
Yep.
So it's like, not having to deal with that. And then when you get on the other side of the planet, living in these major metropolitan areas, Manila is like 40 million plus people, right? I mean, New York City is what is it? New York, like 8, 10,
Yeah, something like that.
So it's like that Metro Manila 4X is that. And so you can only imagine the foot traffic, the car traffic. It's insane in these places when you're not used to it. So I had to get back to a little bit of my wusa,
Zen.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. After that happened, Randy, was there any kind of, was that kind of like an eye-opening moment for you or anything? Did it change things? Did you slow down? Did you incorporate things like meditation, time off? Because you said that you didn't do anything in 2020. Was that what you said? Like 2020 was
2020, as far as work is concerned, I literally didn't do a thing the entire year.
Was it calculated? Was it related to that, or
no? It was just because everything was shut down. The gym was shut down for 3 months. Everything was shut down, and there was just nothing. Gotcha. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. It just, it was weird, very weird. But it wasn't a lifestyle issue. I already knew I had high blood levels from getting blood tests every year while I was a professional fighter. So I knew my hematocrit and hemoglobin levels were always very abnormally high, right at the top of normal. I didn't anticipate the TRT thing kicking it up over normal and causing the problem. I'm just happy it went down when it went down and where it went down. The month before I was on a huge camping trip up in Yellowstone, hiking up Yosemite Falls Yosemite and hiking up Yosemite Falls. And, I was extremely dehydrated on that hike. We ran out of wire by the time we got to the top and still had to hike all the way back down. If that had happened there was no way I was getting to any medical attention in time. So I'm glad it happened when it happened. The doctors are like, we don't know what to do with you. What are we going to do? Send you to rehab to curl 10-pound dumbbells? I mean, it wasn't a lifestyle issue. It was genetics. And so I didn't really have to change much. They're like, well, you're cleared. A week after the heart attack, I was cleared to do whatever I wanted, to train, to spar, to do whatever I wanted. So it was a bit strange. I didn't need to change my eating habits. All that stuff was good. My body fat's still low. Again, I think that one car wreck in 94 is what caused the issue in the artery. And then my thick blood with the TRT created the clot. So
do you, because you have thick blood, do you donate blood on a regular basis?
I have to. And that's the issue. I found out when I moved to Vegas that I had unusually high levels iron, and carry way too much iron.
Yep.
And so they wanted me to go to the blood bank and just give blood, which I'm happy to do. They won't take my blood at a blood bank because I was stationed in Germany in the 80s and I may have been exposed to mad cow and there's no way they can tell. So they won't take my blood. I have to go to a regular phlebotomist. Thankfully, my general practitioner has a phlebotomist that's in his office twice a week.
And you just do a bleed?
So I just go to the office and dump blood. They take it out and throw it away.
That's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. That's insane. So you do that. How often you do that then? Every 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
Every 3 to 4 weeks now.
Yeah.
So, once a month I've got to go in, see the phlebotomist, dump 500 mils of blood and that keeps my levels down normal. So I can still stay on the TRT, keep my body fat lower and my energy levels higher. And, I think since the TRT program, I think my testosterone's gone up to about 700 or 800, somewhere up there in much more normal range.
How do you feel?
I feel good. Feeling good in the workouts. I feel energetic. I'm having fun, the travel schedule is insane, but I'd much rather be doing that than sitting at home.
Yeah, so, no, I got you. But are you living in Vegas now? Or are you
Vegas
in Washington?
Is still home. When I went through the divorce in 05, 06, I moved to Vegas to get out of Oregon and just kind of reset, kind of clear the dust. And I started, I was about that same time that I was recognizing that I was creating a brand through being a professional athlete and needed to take advantage of that fight money and do some things that when I wasn't able to walk those 4 steps up into the cage, it was going to take care of me after that. And so I started the clothing company and the gym brand and all those things in that space. And then, my 401k plan, all those sorts of things, got a wealth manager and try to take care of some of that money and finish out the last 6 or 7 years of the fighting career. So I feel fortunate, and that light bulb came on.
Yeah.
I recognize that a lot of fighters don't recognize that
Yep.
they have a short window to make that kind of money and to be a professional athlete, and they better take care of that so that when they can't perform anymore, can't fight anymore, that money takes care of them. So I'm very fortunate that way. And that light bulb went off for me. A lot of guys, it doesn't go off.
Your fight career, you just talk about 05, 06. I think you and I overlapped. The only fight that we overlapped on was UFC 68, the one in Columbus. Did we ever fight on another? Yeah. Did we ever have any other cards that we both fought on?
I think I was at a lot of your fights, and you were probably at a lot of my fights, but I think that's the only card we were on together at the same time.
Yeah, I fought in. So my first fight was UFC 42. You were 13. Was that your first one?
13 was my first, yeah.
And then what was it? UFC like 43 or 44 when you fought Tito? I think it was at Mandalay Bay. Is that the one where you spanked him on the butt?
Yep. Yes. That's the only time I fought him. That was right after the first Chuck fight.
Yeah. So
almost that same summer.
Yeah, I think that was the first time I ever saw you fight live. We didn't know each other at that point in time, and I'd had one fight in the UFC at that point. But I remember when I was sitting there in the audience, by the way, on that fight, like seeing you do that, I thought for a moment, just for a split second, I thought you were tapping out, and I was like, "What is he doing?"
That's what his corner was certainly yelling that when that happened. And you could never plan that in a million years. I mean, 45 seconds left in the fight. It's been a pretty dominant exchange. He's a bit in desperation mode, so he rolls to the knee bar. I slip it out, but I can't get my foot all the way out. So I'm stuck, kind of him on his back. And the only thing I can see is his butt, and it just popped into my head. He needs a spanking.
Could you imagine if that fight was stopped over that?
Oh, man. Thankfully, it was John, and John recognized what was going on.
Yeah. John's a good ref, man. I always appreciated when he was reffing my matches. No, but you and I fought in Columbus, UFC 68. So here's a funny story. I don't know. Hold on. What match was it? What UFC was it when you fought James Toney?
That was in 08 in Boston. That was the very first show they ever did in Boston.
What number was that?
I can't remember the number.
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up.
I remember seeing you in Columbus. I'll tell you a funny story about the James Toney one, but I remember seeing you in Columbus at that time. And I remember seeing like you were in really good shape. I remember thinking at that time, just so you know, I was like, when I saw you, I was like, man, I hope when I'm his age, I look like that. No joke, man. Like I remember seeing you, I don't know if it was at weigh-ins or whatever. I just thought like, God, man, this guy, like, I hope I look like that at his age. Truly. That's what I said to myself. So here's a funny story. When you fought James Toney, you and I don't remember where we were, and you were telling me, I said, how did prep go? And you basically told me, like, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in. I'm going to, pump the jab, get him to think that I'm actually going to throw a punch at him. And then I'm just going to go for the low ankle pick. Like, he pretty much was like, take a low ankle pick. And then it's just checkmate at that point in time. I was like, yeah. So I knew some of the guys that were involved in James Toney's camp. And they ran into me and they said, yeah. Like, I was like, how'd camp go? And they're like, man, he's looking really good. He's, defending the takedowns really well and this and that. And I was like, really? And they said, yeah, like we don't think this is going to be a problem at all. I said, well, it's funny you say that. I said, because I talked to Randy, and Randy told me that he's not even going to take this guy down, that his boxing's so terrible that he's going to outbox him all day. And this is what this guy says to me. He's like, really? I said, yeah. He goes, in what world does Randy think that he can outbox James Toney? I was like, exactly. In what world do you think you're going to stop Randy's takedown? Like, you guys are so dumb. As I said to the guy, I'm like, in what world, God. Like think, man, like think, like, I was like, but I told him that you were going to outbox him, and they looked at me like, that's just the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. I'm like, yeah, so is trying to stop Randy's takedown. I'm like, look, I've been wrestling for a long time, and I'm not going to stop Randy's takedown. Like, this fool has no chance.
Oh, that's really fun. Yeah, that was a fun fight. I was honored to get the nod and be able to represent MMA in a match like that. And obviously now we're seeing all kinds of crossover matches going the other way, and MMA guys foraying into boxing in the Trillers and the Jake Paul, Logan Paul stuff. So
did you see the match that One Championship did with DJ and Rodtang? That hybrid match?
No, I missed that.
Oh man. So they did a hybrid match. So it was DJ versus Rodtang, and Rodtang's one of our Muay Thai champs. And so they did, the first round was all Muay Thai. The second round was MMA. The third round, had it made it to the third round, was all Muay Thai. And so I thought that DJ would come out in the first round and just utilize the clinch and try to chew up as much time off the clock as he could. And I mean, because Rodtang's a beast, man. I mean, these strikers that are pure Muay Thai or pure kickboxers, they're on a different level, man. And so like DJ came out, and at first he wasn't really clinching, and I'm like, man, what are you doing? What are you doing? About midway through the round, he really started utilizing the clinch and taking some of the time off the clock. But yeah, second round he took Rodtang down and was, I think it was rear naked choke is what he finished him with.
But I knew that DJ fight was coming up. It looked really interesting. I thought it was going to be full MMA, though. I didn't know you were doing a hybrid. That's really cool.
The way One Championship does their stuff, like we have an entire Muay Thai roster, we have an entire kickboxing roster, we have an entire MMA roster. And it's pretty cool because when the company decided that they wanted to do these shows, like I remember like our CEO, we were talking, he's like, yeah, I want to do these Muay Thai matches. And I was like, who comes to an MMA event to watch kickboxing or Muay Thai? Like, I was like dead set against it. And then we did a show, and I watched the show, and we do our Muay Thai in the 4-ounce gloves and the MMA gloves, which makes it really interesting. Yeah. And I watched the event, and I watched these Muay Thai matches, and I was like, I liked it, but I was like, I don't want to like it. So I was like, and now I really look forward to these matches. And so we have these ideas for different hybrid matches and stuff like that. And it's been pretty cool. Pretty cool. Some of the stuff they've been able to come up with.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really cool.
I'll ask you this. I know we're coming up on time here. I don't want to keep you all day. And by the way, just having this conversation is fun because I haven't had time to catch up with you, super busy. We're always jet setting all over the place. But when you look back at your career, like, and I'm not saying it like it's over, but I mean, just everything that you've done, what's the one moment in your career where you're like, this is like this moment in time, whether it was shooting a movie, doing Dancing with the Stars, I don't know, a moment in practice, a fight, getting your hand raised. What's that one moment that comes to mind where it's like, this is that key moment in my life that defines me?
Man, I wish I could say it was just one. I feel like I've been so blessed and fortunate and I feel like a cat. I've lived these phases of life. I had the Army phase and 6 years in the Army, I won my first world championship in the Army as a soldier, wrestling in the military world championships at 180.5 pounds in Palermo, Sicily. It was one of the best wrestling trips I've ever been on. I mean, right on down the line, 91, I was on the U.S. team in Greco wrestling nemesis, a guy I had never beat, the Cuban, Ronaldo Pena, in front of Fidel Castro in an outdoor arena in Havana, Cuba, and winning the gold medal in the Pan Ams and beating that guy finally for the first time after as many times as I'd wrestled him.
On his home turf.
In front of his,
Yeah.
I mean, that was just one of those things. And winning that fight in Columbus and against Big Tim after 13 months of retirement, that crowd that night was insane. That was the biggest crowd in North America that we'd had at that point.
Yep.
And I mean, that last 10-second countdown is something I'll never forget. It was unbelievable. So I've had the fortune, walking on set in Rio de Janeiro with Sylvester Stallone and the rest of those guys. Talk about a pinch me moment. And like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? I mean, I just said a couple of instances like that where I was like, I can't even believe this has happened. And so very fortunate, amazingly blessed for sure.
I just sold a 67 Camaro that I had in Barrett Jackson recently. And the day that I sold my car, Stallone was there at the auction.
Oh. Yeah.
And so when after I was up on stage, because have you ever been to a Barrett Jackson?
I have been to one in Vegas.
Oh yeah, they're so fun. I love those shows, man. They're fun.
I love watching them on TV.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Right? They're addicting, and like you'll watch one car come across, and you're like, okay, what's coming up next? It's terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually met him for the first time, Sly, and I told him, I said, man, you and I've probably been in the same building about 50 times. And I've never actually met you before. So just a quick little exchange, like, hey, pleasure to meet you or something, like, it was quite nice. But yeah, it was a fun experience all around, selling the car at Barrett Jackson.
Now, was that Was that the car from The Ultimate Fighter?
It was the one from season 11 when I filled in for Tito and fought Chuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, yeah.
I was at that Chuck fight. That was up in Vancouver, right?
Yep.
That was the fight up in Vancouver. I was at that fight.
Yeah. So speaking of, so I fought at Nationwide, and at the time, Nationwide was a record-setting crowd. I don't know, I think it was 21,000 something, maybe
21,000, almost 22,000, I think.
Yeah. And then when I fought Chuck, I don't remember the timing, but it was a record sellout. Like they sold out tickets in like 13 minutes or something when they went on, like from the time they went on sale. It was pretty cool. It was especially cool because that was originally slated to be him and Tito, right? Because they were the coaches of The Ultimate Fighter, and then Dana called me and had me fill in. So the fact that there was enough buzz and excitement about the two of us fighting that it could do something like that, I was like, this is really cool.
I think, if I remember correctly, the Canucks had just won the Stanley Cup when just that fight, around the time that fight happened. So a bunch of the hockey players were all at your fight. I met a bunch of those guys at your fight.
Yeah, I wouldn't have remembered because during camp I would have been laser focused on training, and so. But that's a cool story. And you know what the thing? That's the thing that stinks, man. You're fighting. You're kind of a bit of a prisoner to your hotel room. You know, because once the fans show up during fight week, you can't really go anywhere anymore, and so you don't really like Vancouver. Looks like a really cool city. Well, I've been back since, so it is a cool city. But from the perspective of that point in time, I was like, man, this looks like a cool place. I'd like to get out of here and actually enjoy this place. But you never really could between media obligations and checking weight and making weight and all the stuff that comes with fight week. Yeah. It's like, so I've been to tons. I've opened up markets in Germany, opened up markets in Northern Ireland and in Southern Ireland, and never really got to fully enjoy those places the way that you should be able to if you're traveling.
Yeah.
So
I had that experience too. I wrestled all over Europe. I've been to almost every major city in Europe. And everybody asked me how I like that. I said, well, I saw the inside of a gym.
Yeah, exactly. They have amazing gyms in Prague, by the way. I mean, their gymnasiums, the mats, they had full 1 inch. All right. I'm going to hit you with one last thing before we get out of here. Talk to me about your Burt Reynolds post.
Oh, so I've become really good friends with Horny Mike from Counting Cars. And Mike's a great guy, very talented guy. And so Burt Reynolds passed away. And obviously, I think everybody was, we all grew up watching Smokey and the Bandit and so many of those films that he was so well known for and such a unique personality. And so Horny Mike tags me in a video where he's doing burnouts for Burt. He's got his Hellcat out there and he's spinning donuts in a parking lot somewhere. And I happen to be, it's the Christmas months. So I happen to be up at the Colorado house up in the mountains. I mean, literally on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere with an old Toyota Tundra. You got one that same time. That Toyota
you still have that truck?
I just sold it a year ago.
Nice.
So all I have is this Toyota Tundra. I'm like, well, I'm not doing burnouts for Burt on a dirt road in this.
Yeah.
So I was like, I had no response. He tagged me like, you got to do burnouts for Burt. Come on. So Mindy's like, well, you could do that Burt Reynolds pose that he did. You could leave your clothes on. I was like, well, why the hell would I do that? Why would I leave my clothes on? She's like, oh, well, okay. So that night we set up the bear rug and up in the loft and in the cabin. And it took me 2 takes to get it. I almost spilled the whiskey the first take. And obviously I didn't want to expose the junk either. So it was a difficult one to do, but Mindy helped me get it shot. And I just thought it was funny. And certainly, again, one of those moments where you're putting yourself out there, exposing yourself literally and figuratively a little bit. So that's where that came from. I kind of got Horny Mike and he's like, well, I got no comeback for that.
Yeah. Like, it's like, okay, I did that. Like, I'm still going to do your burnout. Let's see you post this now, dude. When I saw that post, I was like, man, this is a man of confidence right here that just does not care. Awesome post.
Yeah, it was funny.
Well, listen, Randy, I appreciate you coming on, man. Hey, since we did a lot of talking about it, where can people get involved with MVP or what was the other one called? Extreme Couture GI
Foundation. Yeah. So if you go to vetsandplayers.org, that's MVP, Merging Vets and Players. So the website is vetsandplayers.org. And then for the Extreme Couture GI Foundation, it's xcgif.org. We've got our 14th annual motorcycle poker run coming up in Las Vegas on May 14th. I've got a ride in Seattle on the 25th of June and the 23rd of June in Quad City, or not June, July, 23rd of July in Quad Cities, Illinois. And then I think we're doing something in the fall in September in Nashville for the Extreme Couture GI Foundation. But you go to any of those websites, the schedules will be there. If you're a veteran or a retired athlete, tune in to vetsandplayers.org, find one of our hybrid meetings, get on a Zoom and get connected with the vets in your area and get a workout in. We all need to stay in shape and stay happy by sweating. So thank you for allowing me to put that information out there, Rich.
All good.
I appreciate it.
And listen, if you want to see Randy almost naked, follow him on Instagram. You can just search Randy Couture. It'll come up verified.
Yeah. XC Natch.
XC Natch. Yeah. Awesome, man. Listen, it was good catching up with you, man. I do appreciate you coming on today.
Great to see you, bud.
Quite Franklin is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor legal advice, nor a statement of Quite Franklin policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of that product or entity by Rich Franklin or Quite Franklin. The views expressed by guests on the podcast are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by Quite Franklin employees or representatives are the views and opinions of the persons expressing them, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Quite Franklin or any of its officials or principals. Nothing heard on this podcast at any time is medical advice or is intended as medical advice. The listener must always consult his or her personal physician or other qualified medical professional regarding any questions of a medical nature. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact our general counsel.